Welcome back, everybody. So this should be the last installment of our presentation on TOK history, and today we're going to focus on the schools of historiography. So how exactly do historians and different historians believe that history should be approached? And what is the standard for knowledge, construction, and verification according to these different schools? All right, so first of all, let's talk about what historiography is. If you guys major in history, like I did, you might have to take a kind of senior seminar or some kind of seminar at some point about the methods of studying history. And that is referred to as historiography. So it's the actual study of the methodology of how we develop history as an academic discipline. Now, there are probably other schools, but the three main schools in modern historiography are the Whig school, the Marxist school, and the Annalist school. I think you'll find that a lot of academic historians today probably either fall into the Annalist camp or the Marxist camp. The Whig historians were more of a 19th century thing, so we'll get into that a little bit. Basically, these are three different theoretical approaches to what constitutes history and the reasons why history happens and what should be focused on when developing understanding of historical cause and effect. So, the first one we'll look at is the Whig school. Now, the Whigs were a political party that began in England and became a kind of anti-slavery party in the United States and lasted for a couple of decades in the 1830s and 40s, maybe a little bit into the 1850s, before the birth of the Republican Party, which kind of coalesced all the anti-slavery forces. But the Whigs believed that we were on an inevitable move towards liberty and enlightenment. And so they kind of took the whole notion of America as this notion of historical progress, and that progress was the invariable move towards greater liberty and enlightenment. So it very much aligns with the kind of notions that the American founding fathers had, that we needed constitutional government and personal freedom and natural rights, and the growth of the sciences to kind of be a check on a lot of the superstitious politics and oppression that had resulted from previous generations. So this saw the Enlightenment as a great march of progress, and not only for Europeans, but was inevitably going to be the goal that drove all of humanity forward. This drive towards enlightenment, this drive towards more freedom, more liberties. Now, where you see Whig history, I think, a little bit more accepted is in the history of science. So when we look at how science was developed and used, it often kind of correlates with this push towards more kind of rational understanding of the world, less maybe religious understanding of the world, and more emphasis on kind of technology progress and moving history forward. Now, what Whigs ultimately assume is that humans have reason and are kind of driven to move towards a more free and better society. And therefore we can break free from past tradition and past history and kind of continue to progress and push forward. Of course, behavioral economics of the 20th century are going to kind of have a lot to say about humans being rational and making reasonable choices even under free circumstances. So a lot more people kind of align with these next schools. The most famous Whig historians are guys like Herbert Butterfield and Frederick Jackson Turner, who famously wrote the Turner Thesis, which said that the United States needed frontiers to conquer. It was part of our national identity, and that was both of these guys are publishing in the 1800s. So a little bit more controversially, we have the Marxist school. Now, Karl Marx, remember, saw history as invariably a struggle between the classes. So you had the class of what he called the bourgeoisie, who controlled the means of production, the factories, the farms. Marx himself and Engels himself really said this Marxist notion really works when countries start to industrialize and have factory labor. But essentially that economics is what drives history. It's about the stuff that people have, the stuff that people don't have, who can produce stuff, who owns stuff. And it's those kinds of conflicts over property that are going to drive society forward. And Marx believed that all the religious notions and that the kind of spiritual notions that had been kind of intertwined with statism of the past, of the monarchies, was really just fiction. And it was ultimately about economics, who had stuff and who did not have stuff. So Marx's historiography really tries to illuminate the history of the oppressed, people who do not have voices in the more traditional histories, the history of the working class, oppressed nationalities, and of course, trying to liberate the voices from below. Now, one of the assumptions that Karl Marx has is that there's a certain kind of history that's inevitable. So in this way, it's very much like the Whig school. We are inevitably driven towards a more classless human society, and that the inequalities that would be produced by industrialization would invariably lead societies to a communist revolution. So Marx and Engels himself saw that society was inevitably going to go through this. So it's very deterministic in that way. Now, the most famous Marxist history is definitely A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. And Zinn was admittedly not only a Marxist historian, but also a polemicist, somebody who basically tried to point out the nasty stuff that was covered up in past history. So you'll see that Zinn makes no apologies about very specifically trying to focus on the voices that were lost in the American historical record. He's been greatly criticized by this. I mean, there's even a book that was written directly in response to this called A Patriot's History of the United States, in which a lot of Howard Zinn's theories are kind of pointed out to be a little bit of card stacking, that, for the negative stories that he had, there's also positive stories. But anyway, Zinn saw the inevitable oppression that resulted from capitalism and sees that as the driving force in history. And that's what Marxist historians focus on. Now, a little bit more diversified in its view of cause and effect would be the French school called the Annales school. And this develops over the course of the 20th century, but it becomes really, really popular because it tries to incorporate a lot of different factors. So, first of all, it says much of political history is actually a history of everyday people, customs, culture, life, coalescing into a kind of balance of power. So there's often an attempt to explain political events not just through the eyes of leadership and through the decisions and actions of leadership, but also through the lenses that allow for the lower classes, the everyday people, to have more of an influence on how history comes about. So in this way, it insists on taking all levels of society into consideration. This also, so it emphasizes that mentalities and the kind of cultural norms that we have become a kind of collective consciousness in politics and express themselves in a lot of these political events, which are often attributed just to particular kinds of decisions of leadership. But basically, the Annales School founders thought that events were not so much the real causes of history, the real impactful things in history, but rather it's this kind of complex network of mentalities and assumptions and cultural norms that would shape decisions and practices later. Now, they're also going to take into consideration a lot of biological and environmental factors. So it's not just the mentality of people, but it's also what kind of environmental factors drive those mentalities. Now, one of the most famous works of Annales history is probably Guns, Germs, and Steel. That when you look at kind of the biological factors, like access to horses, and which cultures had access to horses, which cultures had certain kinds of disease immunity, and even like how Europe, by being kind of small competitive nation states with each other, were motivated to go out and colonize, whereas a country like China, which was very self-sufficient and kind of collectivized, was much more of a unified whole, never had that imperial ambition because they weren't in competition with each other. It's those kind of complex explanations of history that are really popular amongst Annales historians. Now, the one thing about analysis historians is usually they find Marxist analysis to be overly simplified, that if you just reduce things to purely class conflict, you overlook all these other complicated factors in how history develops. The most famous, or I should say, some of the founding thinkers of the analysis school would be people like Lucien Febvre, who was one of the French historians who was one of the architects of this kind of school of thought, and Marc Bloch. So the last question I have for you here is, what do you think is most appealing? Which kind of school of thought do you find most compelling as a theoretical explanation for why history happens, and why? Why do you think that? All right, so our closing reflection on this unit is just going to be to give me a response about how these ideas about TOK from TOK have actually affected your views of history. How does your view of history maybe change knowing some of those things that we talked about, the massive influence of things like language and how language can be unstable and shift over time, or things like the bias of the individual historian and how that actually is almost inseparable in the study of history, because the historian has to select the sources to use, has to select the framework to analyze with, has to select the language with which to write the history. And then, of course, we kind of looked at some of the kind of collectivized assumptions about history when examining these schools of historiography. So, what do you think is the best way for you to gain historical knowledge? And what kind of methods would you use to gain your most lucid and complete historical understanding? So, I want you to try to respond to these two questions, and that's going to count as your assessment from this last unit. We will meet on WebEx next week to discuss this assessment and then kind of close out the year. So, I miss you guys. I hope to see you all soon, and we will talk soon. Take care, everybody.